The Spartan Agoge is a famous and commonly talked about institution within Spartan society. We like to think that we know quite a lot about it, but it's actually really difficult to pin this down. From pop culture's influence in films like 300 to the surprising lack of historical records, it can be quite difficult to actually understand what the Spartan education system was like. Was it a brutal indoctrination into a warrior culture and world of violence, or an introduction to Spartan beliefs and values? Hi, my name's Adam, I'm an ancient Greek reenactor and history enthusiast, and I invite you to please join me today as we try and grasp a better understanding of what this Spartan education system was really like. The Agoge, as it is famously called, was said to be a harsh upbringing designed to baptize boys into a warrior culture and society. The Agoge, however, was not actually a word used at the time. It was a word that was later used to describe all education systems of the time. So the idea of the Spartan education system being called the Agoge is not strictly correct, for all education systems at that same time period would have been referred to as an Agoge by Hellenistic sources. In the classical age, it is likely that the Spartan education system was called the Paideia, which was no different to any other polis education system, but we do not have a specific name given to the Spartan education system. Now, we only really have two historical sources which describe this institution. One was Xenophon, who's commonly renowned to be the most reliable, as he actually sent his sons through the Agoge when he moved to Sparta. He writes during the 4th century BC and can give us a decent idea of what it was like during the time of the Peloponnesian Wars. The other writer is Plutarch, who writes far later in the 2nd century AD, some 400 or 500 years after classical Sparta, which can obviously pose some issues. Now, with these writers both being later, this begs the question of what was this education system like in the time of the Persian Wars in the 5th century, or even before that, earlier on in the Archaic era. And unfortunately, we really know very little about this. We know that there was an education system in place, and we know that Leonidas went through it, but the details are unfortunately lacking. Even when we look at Xenophon's more in-depth description of it, it's very different from what most people commonly believe. Legend would have us believe that they were torn from their families at age 7 and forced to live in a kind of barracks where they were plunged into combative trials. It did start at age 7. There is not much detail about what took place originally. There were bands of boys who were looked over by a supervisor, but there's actually no mention of military training here. Instead, they were taught essentially the philosophies of Sparta, how to talk like a Spartan, how to think like a Spartan, and essentially their moral conduct. At this point, it would seem that this is more of an education, not a military institution. Other aspects of the youth's education would have been left to the parents, such as reading and writing, and this sort of disbands the myth of them not being able to see their parents and families, and it would seem that they actually got to see them quite a lot. It isn't until later, Xenophon says early teens, around maybe 11 or 12, that the Spartan education began to get more physical. However, this training was still not explicitly military. Most of it was athletics, such as wrestling, boxing, or fighting, but the Spartans also had a love for song and dance, which was also taught. We do not see any explicit mentions of weapons training within the system, but we do know that there was some form of combat training. But we do not know whether this is simple one-on-one wrestling between students or actual combat situations. As far as most of their exercises, it is mainly running, jumping, wrestling, boxing, more gymnastics than anything else. Now, another supposed aspect of the so-called Agoge was come the age of 18, they would have been cast into the wild. We do have reports of this is called the Crypteia, however all of our sources seem to contradict themselves. Our very earliest sources say that this is a small selection of boys who were chosen as almost a rite of passage to survive in the wild. Other sources point to the Crypteia being more of an elite unit that was hand-picked out of the highest candidates, and even others saying that they were an assassination unit used to spy and eliminate helots. Now, all of these seem very different, and I suppose at different times within Spartan development, all of these could have been true. What we can say decently safely is that the Crypteia was not a common thing, that the majority of the boys going through the Agoge would not have been through the Crypteia. It would seem that the Agoge was more focused on building mental resilience and obedience than anything else. For instance, resistance to weather or lack of food, which is situations that you may experience on campaign. We are told that boys were issued a singular cloak, and that they would have to wear this in all seasons. In summer, perhaps getting too hot, and in winter, getting too cold. All of this building up resilience to the elements. They were also made to go barefoot and sleep on the bare minimum. It is also very important to note, though, that the boys going through this were of the Homoi class, the upper class of Spartan society, and the Spartan education system helped build a very tight-knit community. Another commonly talked about aspect of the Agoge was that they were fed too little and forced to steal. However, this has really caused a lot of questions. On one hand, we're told that they were fed too little and forced to steal, and that if they were caught, they were punished, but yet we're also told that one of their leisure activities was hunting, and that each boy was expected to bring food to their messes. Perhaps a more reasonable explanation to this is that their rations were small, however their meals were very nutritious. I actually touched on this more in my Were Spartans short video, which I'll link in the description below if you're interested in that. Now, if the Spartan Agoge was not that militarized, then how come the Spartans dominated ancient Greek warfare for so long? Now, this is a very interesting question, and perhaps I should dedicate a whole video to this, but the Spartan military supremacy did not necessarily come from their individual strength. It came from structure and organizational prowess of the Spartan army. The Spartan military system was far more advanced and far more structured than any other Greek polis had. Hoplites were all citizen soldiers, and they all worked their own jobs, and they did not train regularly. They had to incorporate training into everyday things such as Pyrrhic dances and other aspects. So the Spartans, where their military strength comes from, is essentially how they were able to maneuver and structure their commands through their army. We're not explicitly told that the Spartans trained in combat, but it would seem that they had some form of organizational training or information passed down, and of course, being members of the leisure class, they had more time. In short, the Agoge was not necessarily a military indoctrination. It was far more of an education-based building you as a Spartan, what it meant to be a Spartan. And their military strength did not necessarily originate from the Agoge. Now, the Spartans would have likely been physically fitter than most other Greeks at the time because of their strict physical routines, and of course being a member of the leisure class, the upper class, they had a lot more time to exercise. But it would seem that their military strength came far more from their organizational structure and their tactics and their ability to maneuver more so than their one-on-one military strength. I hope you enjoyed this video and learnt something about the Spartan Agoge. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider liking and subscribing. If you'd like to go the extra mile, become a channel member. Thank you very much to our members. You guys really do mean a lot that you've joined the channel. Thank you very much for watching this video, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.